David Gazzard and Ben Oquist. A lot to talk about. What an extraordinary week that we've seen. David, to you first of all, there's two arms to this response. Obviously the health response, trying to get a lid on this or flatten the curve, as people say, but at the same time, these heartbreaking images of the Centrelink queues. What do you make of where we're at right now?
I got to say, I mean, the images out in front of Centrelink are the most, memorable for me so far. Maybe because I grew up in a generation where there was recession, and you can sort of instinctively feel where this is going to go. Not to understate the health effects of this, but with companies every day announcing layoffs, uncertainty across the workforce more generally, confusion in world markets, knock-on effects through the economy at all levels, you're starting to really get a crystallised picture of what the impact of this could be longer term.
What's your take on it, Ben, where we're at in an economic sense, but also with the National Cabinet meeting again tonight at 6:30 p.m. They met last night, a new list of restrictions and closed facilities, more businesses to close their doors. But today I spoke to the Queensland Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk. She was full of praise for the National Cabinet and the way the Prime Minister's managing all of this.
Yeah, well, I hope the management still goes well. We're all wishing the Prime Minister every success. And I think that's something that's happened different in the political debate. Normally, political opponents are wanting the other to fail. I don't think anybody wants the Prime Minister to fail at the moment. There has been some communication, messaging problems, but we're all willing him to succeed. But you're right, they're making new decisions to close new bits of the economy. And that's why we need such different economic solutions. And we already had a broken economic debate, and it's kind of been ripped asunder by what's going on. And yes, the government's moved in to increase Newstart, effectively doubling it. And everyone thought, whoa, wasn't that fantastic? What a big deal that was. But the reality is we're going to need to do a lot more. And I thought the weakest part of the Prime Minister's press conference today was his response to Andrew Clennell, who said, what about following the UK government's 80% wage replacement strategy? It's been done by the UK government. Tony Abbott is backing it. We're going to need to do a lot more. Those Centrelink queues are just the start. And a bigger government direct investment is going to be needed because it's not like a normal cyclical downturn. We're closing down whole sectors of the economy. Our Centre of Future Work has looked at just the biggest five that are affected: retail, hospitality, transport, personal services, arts and recreation. They account for something like 3.3 million jobs. And not all of those are going to go, but that's a lot to be affected. And I think we have to kind of throw out the old economic orthodoxy and start looking at some much different things. We're going to need a much bigger role for the public sector. We're going to have to shelve the idea that the public sector is kind of inefficient and no good. We need it for our health services, obviously, but we're going to need it to underpin the economy. And that 80% replacement wage idea is going to come up the ladder, on the political ladder, and so is a much bigger role for the government and the public service.
Well, already we're seeing that because the Prime Minister's said last night, he said that the Centrelink, for example, are already looking for 5,000 new employees to try and cover the huge workload that they've got right now. But just to the point that Ben made about the wage replacement idea, because it's happening in New Zealand, happened in the UK, I know the government's working on a third package already. Do you think in your mind that this is where they end up in terms of a wage guarantee, just to stem the bleeding?
Look, I don't know that for sure. I do think that, rather than using this as a way of, reforming the economy in an ideological shape, and I think that one of the reasons the National Cabinet is working well is they've stayed away from that. So it's, rather than it splintering into a whole range of things that some would then say, well, that's Ben's big government dream, they've tended to focus more on let's maintain the jobs we've got. That's the best strategy. Just don't destroy the jobs, so you need a wage replacement. That's point one, I would say. The second is that the Cabinet has to hold together, and there has been some fragmenting because various states have gone back and they've agreed at National Cabinet on a strategy around schools or around the lockdown consistent with medical advice. and then for whatever reason they hit their own people and get rolled in their own parliaments, and so they come out and change that advice. This will work if it all holds together. It's a structure, but one of the reasons it has held together is it hasn't splintered off and gone in different ways. The last thing I would say is that the government has chosen ways of getting money to people that need it through existing channels. So they haven't had to reinvent things, come up with new strategies. So they've gone to New Start, they've gone to the pension, they've gone to accelerated depreciation, they've gone to industry support, where they've had clean ways of doing that. Whether there's a sectoral approach to the fiscal package where sectors of the economy need more stimulus, we'll see. I think that's probably coming, but I would hope they can stay away from the sort of partisan arguments that would potentially divide Labor and Liberal states and hold it all together.
I think it's been good as far as it's gone so far. But the problem is clearly much bigger than anybody anticipated, kind of day by day or week by week. And I think you're right. Ideology's got to be thrown out. I think that's the problem with the government's approach looking forward. If they try and stick to, we've got to use existing systems, existing methods for delivering support, it's not going to be enough. We've got to chuck out that old ideology.
But I think they've done that. They've done that already. Well, and I would actually suggest, I'm not saying this is not based on any immediate intel from the Treasurer's office or whatever else, but what I would say is I think it's possible that they end up doing exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but we have to dump the targeted and temporary and not make the mistakes of the previous fiscal packages that Morrison was going on about at his press conference today, saying we've learnt the lessons from last time. That was a kind of partisan statement about kind of dissing what Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan had done. And I think that ideology has to go. The ideology that says that we can't do more in the public sector, that has to go. Everything has to be on the table. The 80% replacement wage, I think the government is going to have to do more direct jobs.
Kieran,
yes, an 80% replacement is good, but the government's going to have to step up in providing jobs, not just in Centrelink, not just in health, but other areas of the economy too.
Don't forget that we've already committed almost 10% of GDP in the first two rounds of stimulus. That is a huge amount of money.
No, that's
huge.
not 10. That's
the RBA's put some of that in.
That's RBA.
Absolutely,
that's stimulus.
But we've committed in totality 10% of our GDP. That is a massive in terms of job support and stimulus to get through the economy or lending assistance.
RBA liquidity is different to fiscal
absolutely,
stimulus.
And some of that will come back. But that is a massive impact on the economy. Let's let that flow through the economy to start with. But here's the broader point, right? And this is where the PM has this concentric ring view of the economy. Don't attack the centre of the economy before you've had a chance to just look at what you do as you close down the outer rings. Okay, we've started with non-essential. Let's not over-egg this thing and beat the economy down so much we're never going to recover.
The problem is it is down. It's not like a normal cyclical recession or depression.
But it also will bounce. It is going to bounce back.
Correct.
I mean, when it happens, we don't know exactly when, but when it does, the Prime Minister's language is it's going to snap back. Most economists you speak to are confident that because it's a health crisis fundamentally, not a structural financial one, that it will snap back.
That's not how recessions work. I mean, if businesses, this is in businesses' interest now. If a business goes bust, completely bust, it's gone. That wealth and that capital is gone. We need to keep those businesses up, and the only way to keep those businesses up is actually create the demand in the economy, and that's why the government...
Well, to be honest, but yeah, that might be one way, but the other way is to come up with a health solution, isn't it? That's fundamentally what we need. Clive Palmer, he was on earlier in the day, I know he's got his critics, but you can't criticise what he's doing with this particular initiative. He's funding 1 million courses of the drug that UQ, University of Queensland, says basically kills the virus. So it's a treatment, a cure, however you want to put it, but he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, look, that would be great. I think there's probably some time before we actually do get a cure. They've got to go through clinical trials and so on. I'm told it's going to be closer to a year to get that done. Don't forget as well, the US will stimulate heavily. It's election year there. And the Chinese economy will be stimulated as well, which will help buoy financial activity here.
It is a health crisis. Good on Clive Palmer putting that money in, but David's right. No matter how much we throw at the vaccine and the cure responses, there is a health crisis coming. We know that from Italy. I thought Daniel Andrews had the kind of cut-through press conference today when he said, yes, Centrelink queues are bad, but what we've got to avoid is queues for ICUs. And I think that is what the Premiers and everybody really fears. And on the one hand, you've got Scott Morrison rightly trying to look after the economy. I don't think are doing enough yet. There'll need to be a lot more. But on the other hand, you've got the Premiers really worried about what's going to happen when there are queues, not at Centrelink, but for the ICUs. And we're going to have to ramp that up. And I just finally, lastly, I think this is the problem with the underspend we've had in our health system. We've told ourselves it's a great idea to be cutting back in the public sector and making the health system as efficient as possible. That's good, but not if it doesn't mean there's not enough spare capacity. We need a bigger health service so there's more spare capacity to deal with situations.
Well, they're building that capacity right now in terms of ICU, doubling that, the number of ventilators, doubling that number. And the fundamental difference between the GFC, having experienced this place and I guess the political ramifications of it, David, to now is that this crisis, everyone has felt it.
Yeah,
the GFC, people didn't really feel it.
And we shouldn't focus on the negatives or the way we disagree. I think probably the things that unite us are greater than the things that divide us in this, and that's why it's holding together. And Daniel Andrews is quite right. No one wants to see lines to ICU beds, but I also think the flip side to that is no one wants to see lines at Centrelink either.
No.
So it's a carefully modulated strategy that goes hand in hand with the Premiers and Prime Minister working as
well, that's
close as they
good.
can.
That's good because, as Ben said, you know, with an economic, whether it's a business or an individual, when hope is crushed, it's that has so many other ramifications, whether it be health or whatever else.
Look, isn't it great too to see business actually working hand in glove with the government? I mean, people are coming out of the woodwork to say, you know, I've got a client that said, we do veterinary hospitals, we will donate 30 respirators to the government. So that's in train. People are finding different ways to get things to government because they want to help people.
That's encouraging.
Fantastic.
It is indeed. David Gazzard, Ben Oquist, thank you both. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.